Welcome back to Autonomous Frontiers. I'm your host, Alex Clug. People often look at my resume and ask me how I ended up where I am today. They see a West Point engineering degree, consulting work, followed by a stint building a telecommunications network in Venezuela, then moving into private equity in New York, running a gold mine in Peru, and finally co-founding a medical robotics company that merged to become a NASDAQ-listed unicorn. On paper, it looks like a random series of jumps. Telecom, consulting, private equity, mining, MedTech. What do these industries possibly have in common? How does someone go from building telecom infrastructure in Venezuela to evaluating mid-cap companies, to extracting precious metals from the earth, to building medical surgical robots? I think the answer is all the things that really matter. So today we're going to talk about cross-industry insights. We're going to explore how the fundamental principles of business, adaptability, strategic thinking, and operational discipline apply universally, regardless of the product you're selling or the continent you're operating on. We're going to look at how the lessons learned in one sector can become your greatest competitive advantage when you enter an entirely different one. We'll discuss why the most successful leaders are rarely specialists in a single vertical, but rather generalists who know how to apply universal frameworks to novel problems. Let's start with telecommunications. Early in my career, I was the CEO of Telecommunications. We started with just seed funding, and our mission was to build a robust network in Venezuela. In telecom, you're dealing with extensive infrastructure, complex regulatory environments, and the need to scale rapidly to capture market share. It's a capital-intensive, high-stakes game where the barriers to entry are enormous. The biggest lesson I learned at Telex wasn't about fiber optics, bandwidth, or switching protocols, although my electrical engineering background did help me enjoy that side of the business. It was actually about human capital. We built a sales force of, at its peak, 6,000 people. Let that number sink in for a moment. 6,000 individuals spread across a complex geographic region. You cannot manage 6,000 people through micromanagement. You cannot rely on sheer force of will or charismatic leadership alone. You have to build systems. You have to create a culture of accountability, establish clear metrics for success, and empower your mid-level managers to make decisions. You have to build a machine that runs whether you're in the room or not. That lesson, that scale requires systems, not just effort, is universal. Whether you're selling phone plans in Caracas or deploying surgical robots in hospitals across India, if your operational systems can't handle the scale, your company will collapse under its own weight. At Telex, we learned that growth is dangerous if it outpaces your infrastructure. We had to ensure that our customer service, our billing, and our technical support could handle the massive influx of new users our sales team was bringing in. That requires a level of operational synchronization that I've carried with me into every role since. It taught me that the boring parts of a business, the back office operations, the HR protocols, the IT infrastructure, are actually the foundation upon which all rapid growth is built. After my time in telecom, I shifted gears and moved into the world of finance. I became COO, CFO, and then partner at DC Associates, a private equity firm based in New York. This was a completely different environment. Instead of operating a single company from the inside, I was evaluating dozens of them from the outside. We were looking at small and mid-cap companies, searching for opportunities where we could inject capital and operational expertise to unlock value. My time in private equity taught me how to look at a business dispassionately. When you're a founder, you're emotionally attached to your product. It's normal. You believe in your vision so deeply that you can sometimes become blind to the market realities. When you're an investor, you have to look at the cold, hard facts. I learned how to tear apart a balance sheet, how to identify operational inefficiencies, and how to spot a management team that was masking fundamental flaws with aggressive marketing. I brought the operational discipline I learned in telecom into the boardroom. When we evaluated a company, I wasn't just looking at their upside potential, I was looking at their downside protection. I was looking for management teams that understood how to navigate risk. I wanted to see systems in place that could withstand market shocks. I wanted to know what would happen to the company if their biggest client left, or if a key supplier went bankrupt. This perspective was critical when I stepped in as CEO of Secure Fortress, one of our portfolio companies that specialize in secure communications infrastructure. Because I had evaluated the company from an investor's perspective, I knew exactly what needed to be fixed. We didn't waste time on vanity projects or theoretical R&D. We focused entirely on building a robust sales pipeline and preparing the company for a public listing in the UK. We stripped away the excess and focused on core value drivers, which ultimately resulted in a 20-fold valuation increase in just 6 months. That experience solidified my belief that operational focus combined with strategic capital allocation is the most powerful force in business. Now, let's talk about how those lessons applied when I transitioned into one of the most unforgiving industries on earth, mining. Later in my career, I founded and served as CEO of 2 mines in Peru, Alta Gold, that had previously been operated by Glencore, and Moyehuacan, that had been found and mined by informals in the south of Peru, near Arequipa. Mining can be an incredibly complex and hazardous industry. You're dealing with the physical realities of the earth, fluctuating global commodity prices, and the immense responsibility of keeping your workers safe in a dangerous environment. It's an industry where mistakes don't just cost money, they cost lives. The critical insight I gained in the Andes Mountains was the importance of extreme risk management and adaptability. In mining, a single geological surprise, a vein of ore that suddenly disappears, or a rock formation that is harder to drill than anticipated, can wipe out your profit margins overnight. A sudden shift in local regulations or a change in the global spot price of gold requires immediate strategic adjustments. You have to build contingency plans into your daily operations. You have to be able to pivot your strategy the moment the data changes. I took the financial rigor I learned in private equity and applied it to the physical operations of the mine. We had to calculate the exact cost of extracting every ounce of gold and constantly adjust our operations based on the market. But more importantly, I had to apply the leadership lessons I learned in the military and in telecom. When you're operating a mine in a remote location, your team has to trust you implicitly. You have to build a culture of safety and accountability that permeates every level of the organization. You have to ensure that the miner at the rock face understands the strategic goals of the company, and that the executive team understands the daily realities of the miners. Which now brings us to MedTech and surgical robotics. When Barry Cohen and I co-founded Avra Medical Robotics, we were entering an industry that is arguably the most complex and highly regulated in the world. We are dealing with cutting-edge artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, FDA approvals, and ultimately human lives. The stakes could not be higher. But the challenges we faced at Avra weren't entirely new to me. When we needed to build a robust, reliable medical robotics system, I drew on my engineering background from West Point, my experience building resilient telecom networks. I understood that a system is only as strong as its weakest link, and that redundancy and reliability are paramount. I knew how to build a team of engineers who could execute a complex technical vision without losing sight of the commercial realities. When we needed to navigate the complex regulatory pathways for medical devices, I drew on my experience managing international mining regulations in Peru. I understood how to work with government agencies, how to ensure strict compliance, and how to build a culture that respects the rules without being paralyzed by them. I knew that regulatory compliance wasn't just a legal requirement. It was a strategic advantage that could build a moat around our business. And when it came time to scale the company, take it public, and eventually merge with SS Innovations, I drew on everything I'd learned in private equity about capital allocation, team building, and strategic vision. I knew exactly what institutional investors were looking for because I used to be one. I knew how to structure the company for a public listing because I'd done it before with Secure Fortress and several other portfolio companies. I understood how to communicate our vision to the market in a way that drove valuation and attracted the right partners. The technology was different. We were building surgical robots instead of telecom networks or gold mines, but the business fundamentals were exactly the same. The most valuable asset you can cultivate as a leader is cross-industry adaptability. If you spend your entire career in one narrow vertical, you risk developing tunnel vision. You start to believe that the way things have always been done in your industry is the only way that can be done. You become blind to disruptive innovations that are happening just outside your field of view. You become a specialist in a world that increasingly rewards generalists. But when you step outside your comfort zone, when you take the operational discipline of a military engineer and apply it to a tech startup, or when you take the financial rigor of private equity and apply it to a mining operation, that's when true innovation can happen. That is when you can see solutions that others miss. The world is full of examples of outsiders, of very young entrepreneurs building hugely successful companies that broke the mold. Take Square, for example, founded in 2009 by Jim McKelvey and Jack Dorsey, who was 32 years old at the time. They revolutionized the payment world by making accepting a credit card payment as easy as downloading an app. In hindsight, this seems obvious, but I can tell you it wasn't. A few years before Square, not many years before then, I was part of a team that was consulting for Visa International and was following up on work completed by Boston Consulting Group, BCG, work they'd done for Visa. Visa had spent over $1 million to try to figure out how they could simplify their four-pronged approach to payments and adapt it to the online world. The four prongs were the cardholder, the merchant, the card issuer, and the acquirer. That's the party that maintains a relationship with the merchant and processes their payments. After all that money and time was spent, they came up with nothing. It took a young outsider to change everything, not someone that was in the industry. The future belongs to the synthesizers. It belongs to leaders who can connect the dots across different disciplines and apply universal principles to novel challenges. It belongs to those who are not afraid to be the novice in the room, because they know that their diverse background gives them a unique and powerful perspective. So the next time you face a seemingly insurmountable problem in your business, don't just look at what your direct competitors are doing. Look at how a telecom company scales its network. Look how a private equity firm evaluates risk. Look how a mining operation manages safety and logistics. Look outside your industry, and you might just find the exact insight you need to break through. Well, that's our time for today on Autonomous Frontiers. I'm Alex Clug. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time as we continue to explore the intersection of innovation, leadership, and the future of technology.